My sister Victoria's voice cut through the elegant dining room of Belmont's, one of Seattle's most exclusive restaurants. Go find another table. This one's for family, not adopted girls. Laughter erupted around the table. My parents, my brother Kenneth, and Victoria's husband all joined in like it was the funniest joke they'd ever heard. I stood there holding my clutch, my face burning with humiliation as other diners turned to stare. The chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting warm light on the white tablecloths and crystal glasses, but I felt a sudden biting cold inside. My name is Rachel, and I'm 27 years old. I've lived with this family for 22 years, ever since they adopted me when I was 5. 22 years of being reminded I didn't belong, that I was different, that I was less than. "Oh, don't be so sensitive," my mother Patricia chimed in, waving her manicured hand dismissively. "We're just teasing." I knew their version of teasing. It was a sharp, cruel thing disguised as affection. "Sit down, Rachel," my father Gregory ordered, his voice low. "You're making a scene." Saturday, I swallowed the protest rising in my throat. This dinner was supposed to celebrate Victoria's latest business deal, some real estate investment that my parents had helped finance. They were always helping Victoria. When I'd asked for a loan to start my graphic design business 3 years ago, they'd laughed and told me to be realistic. The evening dragged on with conversation flowing around me like I was invisible. Victoria bragged about her new Mercedes. Kenneth discussed his promotion at the bank. My parents beamed with pride, asking questions, offering congratulations. When I tried to mention a major client I had just landed a contract worth $50,000, my mother cut me off. "That's nice, dear. Kenneth, tell us more about your bonus." By the time dessert arrived, I had retreated into myself, the familiar numbness settling over me. This was my role in the family, the outsider, the charity case, the one they kept around to feel good about themselves. Then the waiter approached with the check. My stomach dropped as he placed the leather folder directly in front of me. I stared at it confused. "What's this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Victoria's laugh was sharp and bright. "Oh, didn't we tell you? You're paying tonight. Consider it your contribution to the family, since you're always taking and never giving." Taking the word came out strangled. "I've never asked you for anything. The roof over your head, growing up, the food, the clothes." Patricia ticked off items on her fingers. "We gave you everything, Rachel. The least you can do is buy us dinner." My hands trembled as I opened the folder. The total made my vision blur. $3,270. They had ordered the most expensive wines, multiple appetizers, premium steaks, lobster tails. Kenneth had ordered 3 desserts just because he could. "I can't afford this," I whispered. "Of course you can," Victoria said sweetly. "You just told us about your big client. $50,000, wasn't it? This is nothing to you now." The truth was that $50,000 was spread over 6 months of work, and most of it was already allocated to business expenses, rent, and paying off the student loans my family had refused to help with. This single dinner would wipe out my savings. But I couldn't make another scene. I couldn't give them more ammunition to call me ungrateful, difficult, dramatic. With shaking hands, I pulled out my credit card and placed it in the folder. The waiter whisked it away, and I forced myself to smile, to sip my water, to pretend this wasn't devastating me. Victoria was already talking about their upcoming vacation to Tuscany. My parents were planning to join them. Nobody asked if I wanted to come. They never did. When the waiter returned with my card and receipt, I signed with numb fingers. $3,270 for the privilege of being humiliated by people who were supposed to love me. "Well, that was lovely," Patricia said, dabbing her lips with her napkin. "Same time next month?" Next month. They expected this to become a regular thing. I opened my mouth to protest, to finally say enough was enough, when a new voice cut through the chatter. "Just a moment, please." Everyone fell silent. Grandma Dorothy, who'd been quiet all evening, was standing at her end of the table. At 78, she still commanded attention. Her silver hair perfectly styled her posture straight as a rod. Something in her expression made my chest tighten. I'd noticed her observing family gatherings with an intensity that made me wonder what she was thinking. While my parents and siblings treated me like an obligation, she'd been the one who showed up at my school plays, who remembered my birthday, who asked about my dreams. "Mother, what is it?" Patricia asked, irritation creeping into her voice. "We were just about to leave. Sit down, all of you." Grandma Dorothy's voice carried an authority that made even my father straighten in his chair. "I have something to say, and you're going to listen." Victoria rolled her eyes, but stayed seated. Kenneth checked his phone under the table. My parents exchanged confused glances. And then the restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Grandma Dorothy's gaze swept across each of them before landing on me. Something flickered in her eyes, sadness maybe, or disappointment in everyone else. I've been watching this family for years, she began, her voice steady but cold. Watching how you treat Rachel, how you've always treated her. Mother, really, Patricia protested. This isn't the time. Be quiet. The command was so sharp that my mother actually obeyed. I'm 78 years old, Grandma Dorothy continued, and I've spent the past few months thinking about my legacy, about where my money should go when I'm gone. The table went very still. My father's fork clinked against his plate as he set it down. Victoria's smug expression faltered, replaced by a look of intense, greedy focus. She'd been counting on that inheritance for years, planning elaborate purchases, making investments based on money she didn't even have yet. We all know how this works, Grandma continued. The bulk of my estate goes to Patricia, then is distributed among the grandchildren. That's what the current will says. I watched Victoria's face light up. But Grandma Dorothy said, letting the word hang in the air, I've had my lawyer draw up a new will. She pulled an envelope from her purse and placed it on the table. Signed and notarized yesterday. The silence was suffocating. You can't be serious, Kenneth said, his voice a low hiss. You're changing your will because of what? A stupid joke. A joke. Grandma Dorothy's laugh was bitter. I've watched you all mock and belittle Rachel for over 2 decades. I've watched you exclude her, humiliate her, treat her like she's less than human. And tonight, you made her pay for your excess while you laughed about it. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. Grandma Dorothy walked slowly around the table until she stood beside me. Her hand rested gently on my shoulder. Rachel is the only one in this family who's shown true character, she said. She's worked for everything she has, built a business from nothing with no help from any of you. She's kind, talented, and resilient despite your best efforts to break her spirit. She looked at each of them, her disappointment evident. You've all failed spectacularly. So here's what's going to happen. Grandma Dorothy said, her voice gaining strength. My entire estate, every dollar, every property, every investment is going to Rachel. The explosion was immediate. What? Victoria shrieked, jumping to her feet. You can't do that. That's not fair. Kenneth slammed his hand on the table. Mother, think about what you're saying. You're talking about billions of dollars, Patricia pleaded. Rachel isn't even really family. Stop. Grandma Dorothy's command silenced them again. Rachel is more family than any of you have ever been. She's earned this not through blood, but through character. Through being a better person than all of you combined. I sat frozen, unable to process what was happening. Billions of dollars. Grandma Dorothy's entire fortune. It was impossible. It was unreal. You're being manipulated, Gregory said desperately, his voice cracking. Rachel must have done something, told you lies. Rachel has done nothing but survive your abuse. Grandma Dorothy cut him off, her voice like ice. And that ends tonight. She pulled out her phone and made a call. Thomas, it's Dorothy. Yes, file the new will immediately. Make sure it's ironclad and prepare the trust documents for Rachel. My family's faces ranged from shock to fury to disbelief. Victoria looked like she might actually faint. Kenneth's face had gone a deep shade of purple. My parents seemed to age a decade in seconds. This isn't over. Victoria hissed at me, her eyes filled with a hatred so pure it was terrifying. We'll contest it. We'll fight you in court. Try it, Grandma Dorothy said calmly. I've made sure everything is completely legal and I'm of sound mind, as a medical evaluation from this morning confirms. She'd planned this, every single detail. The scene descended into chaos. Victoria lunged across the table, her face contorted with rage. Kenneth grabbed her arm, but his own anger was barely contained. My parents sat in stunned silence, their carefully constructed world crumbling around them. You manipulative little Victoria snarled at me. You planned this. You've been playing the victim this whole time. Enough Grandma Dorothy stepped between us. Rachel didn't even know about this until now. It was true. I was still reeling my mind, unable to grasp the scale of what had just happened. Why are you doing this? Patricia's voice cracked, tears streaming down her face. I'm your daughter, your blood. And you should be ashamed of how you've acted, Grandma, Dorothy replied, her voice softer but still firm. I gave you every advantage in life, Patricia. Education opportunities, love. And you took all of that and learned nothing about compassion or kindness. I'm dying, she said, and the world tilted on its axis. The word barely came out of my mouth. Pancreatic cancer stage 4, she said it so calmly, but I saw the pain beneath the composure. I have maybe 6 months, probably less. I found out 3 months ago, and I've spent that time getting my affairs in order, making sure my legacy goes to someone who deserves it. Tears blurred my vision. The one person who'd ever truly loved me was leaving. I want to go home, I whispered. Of course, Grandma Dorothy said, keeping her arm around me. Thomas is outside with the car. As we turned to leave, Kenneth blocked our path. This isn't fair. She's not even really one of us. Move Grandma Dorothy's voice was ice. He stepped aside and we walked through the silent restaurant, every eye following us. The car pulled away from the curb, leaving my former family standing on the sidewalk in shock. Through the rear window, I saw Victoria screaming something, her face twisted with rage. I should have felt something, guilt maybe, or fear, but all I felt was numb exhaustion mixed with a strange sense of freedom. The next morning, I woke up in one of Grandma Dorothy's guest rooms, momentarily disoriented by the silk sheets and the view of Lake Washington through floor-to-ceiling windows. Then the memories crashed back. My phone had been buzzing nonstop. 43 missed calls from Victoria, 27 from my mother, dozens of texts ranging from pleading to threatening. I set the phone down. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Miss Rachel, breakfast is ready, and Miss Dorothy would like to see you in the study. I found her sitting behind an enormous mahogany desk, looking surprisingly energetic. A distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit sat across from her. Rachel, this is Walter, my attorney, Grandma Dorothy said. We need to go over some things. I sat down feeling like I was in a dream. Walter opened a leather portfolio and began explaining the details of the trust, the companies, the investments. Numbers that seemed impossible swam before my eyes. $3 billion in liquid assets, $5 billion in property and investments. The immediate access accounts activate today, Walter explained. $5 million for your personal use while the trust is being finalized. Your grandmother wanted to ensure you had resources right away. $5 million. I felt dizzy. There's more, Grandma Dorothy said, and something in her tone made me tense. Your family will try to contest this. They'll claim undue influence, diminished capacity, anything they can think of. We need to be prepared. There's something else you need to know, she continued. Your adoption wasn't quite what you think it was. The room seemed to tilt again. What do you mean? She pulled a thick folder from her desk drawer, sliding it across the polished wood towards me. My name was on the label. When Patricia and Gregory adopted you, they received a substantial sum of money, she said, her voice even. $750,000 to be exact. It was meant to cover your care, education, everything you'd need growing up. I stared at her, then down at the folder. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were official documents, bank statements, transfer records. They took money for adopting me from a trust set up by your birth parents, Grandma Dorothy confirmed. They died in a car accident when you were 5. They had established a trust to ensure you were cared for. Patricia and Gregory were approved as adoptive parents and given access to those funds. I flipped through the papers, the black ink blurring before my eyes. $750,000. And I had worn secondhand clothes, gone to community college on student loans, been told the family couldn't afford to help me start my business. They spent it all, I whispered, seeing the account statements, the withdrawals, the dates, vacations to Europe, a down payment on their house, Victoria's private school tuition, Kenneth's first car. They spent my money on everyone but me. Yes, Grandma Dorothy said quietly. I only discovered this myself 2 years ago. I've been investigating since then, gathering evidence. That's theft, Rachel. They stole from a child. The betrayal cut deeper than anything else. It wasn't just cruelty or favoritism. It wasn't just neglect. They had profited from my loss. They had taken money that was meant for my care money, left by my dying parents, and used it to spoil their biological children while treating me like a worthless burden. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked, my voice thick with unshed tears. Because I needed to be sure. She paused, looking older suddenly. And because I knew that once you learned the truth, there would be no going back. Your relationship with them, toxic as it was, would be over completely. She was right. Any tiny, foolish part of me that had still hoped for reconciliation, that had wondered if maybe I was too sensitive or ungrateful, died in that moment. They hadn't just been cruel, they had been criminals. What do? I felt lost, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the deception. You let me handle it, Grandma Dorothy said, her voice turning to steel. Walter has already filed a civil suit against Patricia and Gregory for misappropriation of trust funds. With interest over 22 years, they owe you approximately $2.3 million. My phone exploded with calls again. This time it was my father. Answer it, Grandma Dorothy said, her voice firm. Put it on speaker. Let's hear what he has to say. With shaking hands, I accepted the call. Rachel, Gregory's voice was desperate. Rachel, please, we need to talk. Your grandmother isn't thinking clearly. She seems perfectly clear to me, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. This is insane. You can't possibly think you deserve her entire fortune. You've been with us for 22 years, and suddenly you turn on us the moment money is involved. The moment money is involved, I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. You mean like the $750,000 you took for adopting me, the money you spent on everyone except me? Silence. Then a sputtering denial. I don't know what lies she's been telling you. Bank records don't lie, Dad. The word felt like acid on my tongue. Walter has all the documentation you stole from me. You both did. Patricia's voice came through the phone shrill with panic. That money was for raising you, for housing you, feeding you. You gave me hand-me-downs and made me pay my own way through college. I said the years of resentment finally boiling over. Meanwhile, Victoria got designer clothes and a full ride to a private university. Kenneth got a new car at 16. I got nothing. We'll fight this, Patricia threatened. We'll take you to court. Please do, Grandma Dorothy cut in, her voice cool and sharp. I'd love to see you explain the financial records to a judge. Explain how you took money meant for a grieving 5-year-old and spent it on luxury vacations. The call ended abruptly. They'd hung up. 3 days later, the story hit the media. Somehow, and I suspected Victoria was behind it, the details of Grandma Dorothy's will change had leaked. Billionaire disinherits family for adopted granddaughter, screamed the headlines. My phone wouldn't stop ringing with reporters wanting statements. I'd moved into Grandma Dorothy's estate, temporarily unable to face my apartment where they knew the address. Thomas had retrieved my things, and I was living in a strange bubble of luxury and chaos. The public reaction was divided. Some praised Grandma Dorothy for rewarding character over blood. Others called me a manipulative gold digger. The comment sections were brutal. She must have been sleeping with the old woman's lawyer or something. Gold digger alert. This girl knew exactly what she was doing. That adopted girl is going to blow through billions in a year. Watch. I tried to ignore it, but the words burrowed under my skin. Stop reading those, Grandma Dorothy said, finding me hunched over my laptop in the library. She looked frailer than she had days ago, the cancer clearly progressing. People will always have opinions, let them talk. They're calling me terrible things, I said, my voice small. They called me terrible things when I built my first company, she replied, settling into the chair beside me. Said I was too aggressive, too masculine, too ambitious. I proved them wrong. You'll prove them wrong too, Rachel. That afternoon, Walter arrived with news. Patricia and Gregory have officially filed to contest the will. They're claiming diminished capacity and undue influence. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You're going to regret this. We'll destroy you. V. Victoria. Threatening me from a burner phone, my blood ran cold, but then a new feeling took over. Resolve. I screenshotted it and sent it to Walter. Evidence, I wrote. Grandma Dorothy had taught me well. She looked exhausted, but her eyes were still fierce. Walter, file an emergency motion to expedite. I want this settled. She turned to me. Rachel, I need you to do something for me. I'm holding a press conference tomorrow. I'm going to tell the truth, all of it. But I need you to be there with me. The world needs to see you, hear from you directly. Terror gripped me. I can't. You can, she said firmly, because you'll tell the truth. That's all you need to do. The conference room was packed, cameras, rolling lights, bright the air, thick with anticipation. Grandma Dorothy sat beside me at a long table, looking small but unbreakable. Thank you for coming, she began, her voice surprisingly strong. I'm here to address the rumors surrounding my will and my granddaughter Rachel. She laid it all out. The documentation of abuse, the stolen trust fund money, years of emotional and financial manipulation. She showed bank records, medical evaluations, proving her sound mind. It was methodical, devastating, irrefutable. Some have suggested Rachel manipulated me. Grandma Dorothy said, her gaze sweeping the room. The truth is the opposite. My biological family manipulated her. They took a grieving 5-year-old child and used her as a punching bag for their own inadequacies. Despite all of that, Rachel built a life, a successful business. She became everything they are not. Then she gestured to me. Rachel would like to say a few words. My mouth went dry. Every eye in the room was on me. I cleared my throat. I never wanted this attention. I began my voice steadying. I just wanted a family that loved me. I wanted parents who cared if I was okay, siblings who celebrated my successes instead of mocking them. I looked directly at the cameras. My grandmother is giving me her fortune because she believes in who I am, not because I asked for it. And I'm going to honor that trust by being exactly who she sees. As we were wrapping up, a commotion erupted at the back of the room. The doors burst open. It was Victoria. Security moved to stop her, but she was already shouting. This is all lies. She's brainwashed. You all. Her makeup was smeared. Her designer dress was wrinkled. She looked unhinged. I'm the real victim here. That adopted brat has stolen my inheritance. The cameras swiveled to her, capturing every second of her meltdown. Miss Victoria, a reporter called out, what about the allegations that your parents stole trust fund money meant for Rachel? Victoria's face contorted with rage. She made her fatal mistake. That money was ours, she shrieked, her voice echoing in the silent room. We earned it by raising her ungrateful ass. A collective gasp went through the room. The reporters stared at her, then began typing furiously on their phones and laptops. The narrative had just shifted. Victoria stood frozen for a second, the color draining from her face as she realized what she had just admitted on camera for the entire world to see. Get her out of here, Walter said calmly to security. As Victoria was escorted out, still screaming threats, I watched the reporters. They were a frenzy of activity, fingers flying across keyboards, phones held up to record every last second. The narrative had just shifted irrevocably, and Victoria had handed us the victory on a silver platter. Grandma Dorothy squeezed my hand under the table. Well, she said quietly, a faint smile on her lips, I don't think we could have planned that better if we tried. The video of Victoria's meltdown went viral within hours. By evening, it had been viewed over 10 million times. News outlets played it on a loop, dissecting every word, every unhinged expression. Social media exploded. Did she really just admit they took money for raising an adopted kid? LOL. This family is toxic. Team Rachel all the way. Victoria just destroyed her own case in under 60 seconds. Brilliant. The public opinion, which had been a divided conversation, became a landslide of support from me and condemnation for my family. The memes were brutal. The commentary videos were scathing. Legal experts weighed in, all agreeing that Victoria's public admission had essentially torpedoed any chance her family had of contesting the will. Walter sat across from me in Grandma Dorothy's study, looking pleased for the first time in days. Their legal case just collapsed, he said, confirming what the entire internet already knew. Victoria's admission that they earned the trust fund money is essentially a confession to misappropriation of funds. Combined with the documentation we already have, they have no leg to stand on. What happens now, I asked. Now their lawyers will try to do damage control, he said. But it's too late. He was right. Their attempts were pathetic. Kenneth tried a different approach. He went on a local news program presenting himself as the reasonable, calm middle ground. He wore a simple sweater, his hair carefully styled to look sincere. Look, he said earnestly to the camera, I think there were mistakes made on all sides. Yes, maybe we weren't as welcoming to Rachel as we should have been, but to cut the entire family out over childhood disagreements, that seems extreme. The interviewer, a sharp woman named Diane, wasn't buying it. Mr. Kenneth, you call it childhood disagreements. Are you aware that your parents received $750,000 intended for Rachel's care, which they allegedly spent on your education and your sisters? Kenneth's composure cracked. That money was for the whole family. Rachel benefited from it too. She had a roof over her head. You almost had to feel sorry for him. Almost. Diane leaned forward. She wore hand-me-downs while your sister got designer clothes. She took out student loans for community college while you attended a private university fully funded by your parents. How exactly did she benefit? Kenneth stared, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. He ended the interview early, but the damage was done. The public saw right through him. My father tried yet another tactic, sympathy. He gave a tearful interview about how he'd loved me like his own daughter, how this was breaking his heart. We made mistakes, Gregory said, his voice breaking. What parent hasn't? But to be accused of theft, it's destroying us. Patricia can barely get out of bed. Victoria is having a breakdown. The interviewer, the same relentless Diane, showed no mercy. Mr. Gregory, you're describing what you did as not being perfect. But investigators have documented years of emotional abuse and financial exploitation. That goes beyond simple imperfection, doesn't it? That's not abuse, he sputtered. That's just family dynamics. Is it also family dynamics? Diane countered, to steal $750,000 from a child. He walked out too. But my mother's approach was the most calculated. Patricia hired a public relations firm and gave a carefully crafted interview to a sympathetic journalist. She wore a simple dress, minimal makeup, and was positioned in soft lighting. She cried at all the right moments. I loved Rachel from the moment we brought her home, Patricia said, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. She was this beautiful, broken little girl. Yes, we were stricter with her than with our biological children. Maybe that was wrong, but we were trying to prepare her for a hard world. She looked directly into the camera, her eyes pleading. Rachel, if you're watching, please know I love you. I always have. Can we please just talk without the lawyers? Just mother and daughter. I watched the interview with Grandma Dorothy and Walter. When it ended, I felt sick. She's good, Walter admitted grimly. This is the most sympathetic they've looked since this started. She's a liar, I said flatly. This is just another manipulation. I know Grandma Dorothy said, but some people will believe her. The question is, do you care? A week ago, I would have cared desperately. But now, no, I said, surprised by my own conviction. I don't care what strangers think. The people who matter know the truth. Grandma Dorothy smiled a real proud smile. Good girl. Just then, Walter's phone rang. He answered it, his expression shifting from professional calm to intense focus. He listened for a moment, said, I understand, and hung up. He looked at me then, at Grandma Dorothy. That was a contact from the district attorney's office, he said, his voice low and serious. They've been following the case. Based on the evidence we presented at the press conference and Miss Victoria's public confession, they are officially considering pressing criminal fraud charges against Patricia and Gregory. Criminal charges, prison time. The war had just escalated to a level I had never imagined. The court hearing arrived on a gray Seattle morning. The courthouse was surrounded by a swarm of media vans, protesters holding signs both for and against me, and curiosity seekers hoping for a glimpse of the drama. Walter had arranged for us to enter through a private entrance, but I could still hear the roar of the crowd outside. Grandma Dorothy looked frail in her wheelchair. We'd finally convinced her to use one, but her spine was still straight, her gaze sharp. I held her hand as we entered the grand wood-paneled courtroom. My family was already there. Patricia, Gregory, Kenneth, and Victoria sat at the defendant's table with their team of expensive-looking lawyers. Patricia had maintained the soft, sympathetic appearance from her interview, a pearl necklace at her throat. Gregory looked tired and defeated. Kenneth wouldn't meet my eyes. But Victoria stared at me with pure, undiluted hatred. If looks could kill, I would have been a pile of ash on the marble floor. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Judge Morrison, entered and everyone rose. This is a hearing regarding the will of Dorothy Hayes and the contest filed by Patricia Hayes and family she began her voice, leaving no room for nonsense. I have reviewed the extensive documentation submitted by both parties. Counsel your opening statements. The family's lawyer went first, a slick man named Robert, who launched into a dramatic speech about family bonds and the tragedy of elder manipulation. He argued that Grandma Dorothy had been unduly influenced by a conniving opportunist, that her illness had impaired her judgment, and that the will should be set aside in favor of the previous correct version. It was a good performance full of heartfelt pauses and feigned concern. Then Walter stood. He didn't argue or plead, he simply presented facts. Your Honor, he began, his voice calm and methodical. This is not a case of undue influence. It is a case of consequences. He walked the judge through everything. The bank records showing the $750,000 of stolen trust fund money, the medical evaluations from 3 separate respected doctors confirming Grandma Dorothy's sound mind and mental acuity up to the present day. Testimony from business associates, witness statements from former nannies and family friends documenting decades of abuse I had suffered, photos from family events where I was visibly excluded, and finally, the video. Walter set up a screen, and this, Your Honor, is a video of Miss Victoria Hayes filmed at a press conference just last week. He played the clip of Victoria's meltdown. The entire courtroom watched in stunned silence as my sister shrieked about her stolen inheritance and then fatally confessed to her family's crime. That money was ours. We earned it by raising her ungrateful ass. When the video ended, the silence in the courtroom was absolute. Victoria's face was flushed a deep mottled red. "I've seen enough," Judge Morrison said, her voice flat. She looked at the family's lawyer. "Counsel, unless you have a unicorn to pull out of your briefcase, I suggest you wrap this up." Robert, the slick lawyer, stammered, but the judge cut him off. Her gaze settled on my former family, and it was as cold and hard as granite. "The evidence presented here is overwhelming," she said, her words echoing in the vast room. Miss Dorothy Hayes was clearly of sound mind and body when she executed her new will. The documentation of long-term emotional and financial abuse against Rachel is extensive and credible. And the public admission by Miss Victoria Hayes essentially confirms the allegations of financial exploitation. My heart began to race. This was it. Furthermore, Judge Morrison continued the behavior exhibited by the contesting parties during these proceedings, including threats, harassment, and a coordinated campaign of public defamation, only reinforces my belief that Miss Dorothy's decision was not only sound, but profoundly just. A family that truly loved Rachel would never have treated her this way, either before or after the will change. This is Victoria stood up, unable to contain herself. "You can't just..." "Sit down, Miss Hayes," Judge Morrison commanded, her voice like a whip crack, "or I will hold you in contempt of court." Victoria sat, but her fury was a palpable force in the room. "I am ruling in favor of the will as executed," Judge Morrison declared, her voice ringing with finality. "The contest filed by the Hayes family is dismissed with prejudice." A wave of relief so powerful it almost knocked the breath out of me, washed over me. We had won. Furthermore, the judge wasn't finished. "Based on the undeniable evidence of financial misappropriation, I am ordering Patricia and Gregory Hayes to pay restitution to Rachel for the trust funds they unlawfully converted for their own use. $750,000 plus interest, compounded over 22 years, totaling approximately $2.3 million. They have 90 days to pay in full." The courtroom erupted. Patricia let out a strangled sob and collapsed in her chair. Gregory looked like he'd been turned to stone. Kenneth put his head in his hands. And Victoria started screaming, a raw, guttural sound of pure rage and disbelief. She screamed obscenities at the judge, at Walter, at me. Order Judge Morrison banged her gavel. "Bailiffs escort Miss Hayes from my courtroom." 2 large bailiffs approached and took Victoria by the arms. She struggled, still shrieking about stolen money and how I would pay for this, until they physically dragged her out of the courtroom. I sat frozen, the judge's words still echoing in my ears. We'd won completely. Decisively, irrevocably. Grandma Dorothy squeezed my hand. Her grip was weak, but her eyes were shining. "It's done, sweetheart," she whispered. "You're free." Media swarmed us as we left the courthouse, but Walter and Thomas created a barrier. I heard the questions being shouted. How did I feel? What would I do with the money? Did I have a message for my family? But I didn't answer. I just helped Grandma Dorothy into the car and let Thomas drive us away from the noise towards the quiet of her estate. Back in her sunlit living room, she looked exhausted but profoundly satisfied. "I can die happy now," she said, and the words hit me like a physical blow. "Don't say that I whispered. Please." "Oh, Rachel." She cupped my face with her thin hands, her skin like paper. "I'm not afraid. I got to see justice done. I got to know my fortune will be used for good. That's more than most people get." Over the next 3 weeks, I watched her fade. The fire in her eyes softened to a gentle glow. She slipped in and out of consciousness, sometimes lucid, telling me stories about building her first company, and sometimes lost in memories. I stayed by her side, holding her hand, reading to her, and telling her about my plans for the foundation. I wanted to start something to help adopted children who were being abused or exploited, just like I had been. "That's perfect," she murmured during one of her clearer moments. "Help others like you break the cycle." "I will," I promised, my voice thick. "I'll make you proud." "You already have." Her smile was peaceful. "You survived them, Rachel. You stayed kind when they were cruel. You worked hard when they tried to break you. You're everything I hoped you'd be." She died on a Tuesday morning with me holding her hand and the sun streaming through the window. Her last words were, "Thank you for being my real family." The funeral was private, just me, Thomas Walter, and a few of her close friends. My former family wasn't invited, though. Patricia tried to crash it and was turned away by security at the gates. Even in grief, she had learned nothing. In the weeks that followed, the full transfer of assets was completed. The number was still incomprehensible, but I was determined to honor Grandma Dorothy's legacy. The first thing I did was establish the Dorothy Hayes Foundation for Adopted Children. It would provide legal support counseling, emergency housing, and educational funding. The second thing I did was hire an excellent management team for the companies, and I attended every meeting asking questions, studying at night. I was no longer a victim. I was a CEO. My family's downfall was as swift as it was brutal. Unable to pay the $2.3 million in restitution, Patricia and Gregory were forced into bankruptcy. They sold their house, their cars, everything of value. They moved into a small, rundown apartment in a neighborhood they had always looked down on. The criminal charges followed. Faced with irrefutable evidence, Gregory was sentenced to 3 years in a state prison for fraud. Patricia received 2 years. Kenneth, who had benefited directly from the stolen money, was required by a civil court to pay back his portion, approximately $400,000. His marriage collapsed under the financial strain. The last I heard, he was working 2 jobs. His expensive, unearned education rendered worthless without the connections and money that had always propped him up. But Victoria's fate was the most satisfying. Her viral meltdown had made her a public pariah. Her husband divorced her, taking their house and most of their shared assets in the settlement. She'd invested heavily in a restaurant venture that failed spectacularly, leaving her deep in debt. She tried to write a tell-all book, but publishers rejected it after fact-checkers found it to be a work of fiction. She even tried to reconcile with me, not out of remorse, but desperate hope that I'd give her money. I read her email once. "Rachel, I know we had our differences, but we're still sisters. Family forgives family. Maybe we could meet for coffee." I deleted it without responding. 6 months after Grandma Dorothy's death, I stood in the foundation's new headquarters. The walls were covered with photos of kids we'd already helped. Thomas stood beside me. He had accepted a position as the foundation's operations director. "Miss Dorothy would be proud," he said. I hoped so. My phone buzzed. Another message. They never stopped trying. This one was from Kenneth. "Rachel, Mom, and Dad are struggling. Dad's in prison. Mom's barely surviving. I know you're angry, but they're still your parents. Can't you find it in your heart to help?" I typed my response carefully, the words flowing with a clarity I had never felt before. They were never my parents. They were people who took money to raise me and instead used me as a punching bag for their own inadequacies. I owe them nothing. But I'll make you a deal. I will donate the exact amount they stole from me, $750,000, to a fund helping adopted children escape abusive families, and I will do it in their names. That's the only legacy they'll have. I hit send and blocked his number for good. A year later, I was featured in a business magazine, not as the adopted girl who inherited billions, but as a CEO running multiple successful companies and a foundation that had helped over 500 children. The narrative had shifted. I wasn't the victim anymore. I wasn't the gold digger. I was simply Rachel, a woman who had survived and chosen to help others do the same. My family never recovered. They had built their lives on a foundation of cruelty and entitlement. When that foundation crumbled, they had nothing left to stand on. As for me, I built something lasting from the ashes of that painful past. Each child, the foundation saved, each life changed, each cycle of abuse broken. That was my real inheritance from Grandma Dorothy. Not the money, but the understanding that sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction. It's becoming everything they said you couldn't be. And watching them destroy themselves while you're busy building something beautiful, that was simply justice taking its natural course.